Welcome to JK Tells a Story, where real-life dramas unfold. Sit back and enjoy today's tale. Hello, David. This is Alex Thompson, Lisa Palmer's brother-in-law. I'd like to know if Colleen can answer. Unfortunately, I did not hear an answer as apparently the call was suddenly interrupted by a loud scream from my wife Sarah and an insistent knock on the locked door of my home office. After waiting a couple of minutes, I decided to redial David and Colleen's home phone number, but before I could say anything I received a threatening warning from David who said that if I called again he would report to the authorities. I assured David that I understood everything. You have to understand two important things. I don't care if you decide to involve the authorities, and more importantly, I'll talk to your spouse and there's not much you can do to stop it. Have a nice evening. This time I enjoyed the call. Despite the fact that the knocking on the door did not stop, I leaned back in my desk chair, closed my eyes, and considered the key decision at the end of a stormy day. Should I contact my brother? I thought about it. I first met my wife Sarah when we were in high school. In junior year, I sat in the stands with my friends looking forward to the start of a Friday night football game. There was a group of sophomore girls sitting across from us, chatting and laughing. As the game progressed, we took turns approaching the concession stand. When it was my turn, the charming blonde Sarah joined me. We returned to our seats with hot dogs, French fries, and soda, and eventually sat down together. Sarah was not only beautiful but also smart, funny, and caring, a winning combination. In the middle of the third quarter, a voice asked if we were going to go to McDonald's after the game. The girls and boys from our group answered yes together, wanting to continue the fun at the nearest fast food restaurant. Taking a chance, I turned to Sarah and suggested going to Tony's Pizza instead of the greasy fries. To my delight, she agreed. Our casual date soon turned into a weekend tradition, and 2 months later, after getting to know each other better, we decided to move on to a permanent relationship. Everything went well when Sarah agreed to be my prom date. When I went dancing with the most beautiful girl in school, it seemed to me that I was on cloud 9. But it wasn't for long. 2 weeks later, when I was running tennis practice with my neighbor Julie, my world turned upside down. Julie, who was on the girls' team, took me by surprise with her unexpected confession. "I think you're a very nice guy," she said. I was taken aback, reminding her that we'd known each other all our lives. "Why are you telling me this now?" She hit me on the shoulder and said, "It's great that you let Sarah go to the prom with Jimmy Kane. Otherwise he's so shy and boring that he would never have been able to go." Jimmy Kane was a nice guy but definitely shy, nerdy, and I suspect on the spectrum. He was Sarah's neighbor and she always took care of him. I wasn't surprised that Sarah agreed to go to the prom, but I was upset that she didn't have the decency to tell me about it. 6 other people complimented me on my maturity. They thought it was wonderful that my regular girlfriend was accompanied to the prom by her friend and neighbor. To tell the truth, I didn't feel mature. It infuriated me that Sarah didn't have the courage to tell me about the prom. I knew she would confess during our regular date on Friday night. She had no choice. At the last moment on Friday afternoon, I texted her and canceled the meeting. I was bombarded with messages and voicemails asking me to call her. After a dozen calls to my phone, I finally plucked up the courage and texted Sarah, saying that I had learned about her date with the graduate earlier in the week from several sources. It's a pity she didn't tell me about it. Trust is very important to me in a relationship, and at that moment I felt that I couldn't trust her. I turned off my phone and sulked, not talking to Sarah until the start of the next school year. On Friday afternoon, I was walking to my car in the student parking lot when I saw Sarah sitting on the hood of my car. She asked if she could buy me ice cream at Dairy Queen, and this simple gesture marked the beginning of our reunion. We'd been in a relationship for 2 years. In the second year, we maintained a long-distance relationship while I was in college in Colorado. Despite the distance, I often came home and we shared special moments together, including a memorable Saturday night in March after her 18th birthday. Our relationship continued until Sarah left for college the following year. 2 weeks after the start of her freshman year, I received a letter in which she informed me that our relationship was terminated. She explained that she wanted to enjoy college without becoming attached to a serious relationship. After that, I decided not to contact her. In my glory days, I was loved. I studied well and played tennis at the Division III level. After Sarah, there were girls in my life all the time. It wasn't until 2 years after graduating from college that I met Sarah again. At that time, I was working as a full-time architect at a mid-sized firm specializing in commercial buildings, and accidentally bumped into her in a bar while out with work colleagues. We chatted for a few minutes, then returned to our groups of friends. For the next hour, I couldn't take my eyes off her, torn between thoughts of following her to the parking lot when her group dispersed. A smile appeared on my face when Sarah's friends left, leaving her alone in the bar. She sat down on a stool and ordered a drink, turning the chair to face me. Looking at her table, I couldn't help but watch her turn away from the continuous stream of admirers with amusement. It was only when she gave me a simple gesture that I finally broke away from my friends. I stood next to Sarah and waited for her to politely refuse the other guys before approaching her. After she turned down 2 suitors, I finally made my move. Sarah confirmed that she was waiting for me to ask her out because she was close to accepting another person's invitation. We dated for 6 months, after which we decided to become exclusive and move in together. 10 months later, we tied the knot and enjoyed a happy and satisfying life together for almost 5 years. My day started early because I had an appointment with a regular client and his associate at 7:30 a.m. Our meeting was supposed to take place at the Downtown Marriott Hotel in Seattle, Washington, famous for hosting major business conferences. Upon arrival, I found Tony already waiting for me in the reserved conference room. While I was preparing my laptop, laying out the necessary blueprints and pouring myself a mug of hot coffee, Tony and I struck up a casual conversation. Tony, a construction contractor working on a new mixed-use development project, was assigned to this project by his company. At the same time, I, a senior architect, also participated in the development of the building design. My firm specializes in sustainable commercial architecture and acts as the primary design consultant. Over the past few years, we have successfully cooperated on 3 major contracts, but during the current negotiations, Tony and I faced opposition from our superiors. We were informed that we must resolve the 7 remaining critical design issues as soon as possible, otherwise the negotiations would be transferred to other employees of our companies. Determined to find a solution, Tony and I worked hard, skipping lunch and finally taking a break at 2:15 p.m. "Do you think your firm will accept this proposal?" Tony asked. I shrugged my shoulders and replied, "To be honest, I can't understand why our last 2 offers were rejected." Tony thought about it. "Over the years, you and I have become quite close. Maybe this is a test to see if we're too close." I grinned and confessed I had the same thought. Exhaling, I stretched and shrugged again. Tony suggested, "How about a drink?" I took out a notebook and replied, "I need to go through more than 30 pages of notes." I decided to stop drinking. Instead, I planned to stay and input important resolutions into my laptop. I promised to send you a design summary by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. If there are any misunderstandings, let's get in touch by phone right away. My report should be ready by noon tomorrow. Tony agreed. After packing up his computer, I walked Tony through the lobby of the hotel, then bought a Diet Coke at the gift shop and returned to the conference room. When I entered the room again, it seemed to me that the walls had closed around me. Deciding to change the situation, I packed up and moved to a quiet corner of the hotel lobby. After contacting the office, I realized that there were a few small problems in the morning. After that, I texted my wife and asked her to have dinner without me. I settled into a comfortable armchair in the hall and got to work. The change of scenery was beneficial, and over the next couple of hours I managed to do a lot of work. I was completely lost in my thoughts when suddenly a familiar laugh broke my concentration. Startled, I looked up and saw Lisa, my brother's wife, strolling through the hotel lobby in a classic black dress and stylish high-heeled shoes. What attracted me the most was that she was walking arm in arm with a handsome man who was definitely not her husband Michael, my younger brother. Without hesitation, I quickly took out my phone and discreetly took several pictures of this unexpected couple at the reception. One of the photos caused me mixed feelings. I watched as the man's hand went down to her waist and gently squeezed it. I managed to take another series of pictures as they walked to the elevator, capturing their last embrace and kiss before the doors closed. When the elevator went up, I hurried to check which floor they got off on. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Lisa, the sister-in-law I respected, was with a man who was not her husband. I was filled with anger and confusion. As I sat down in my seat, I tried to make sense of the events of that day, from the tense negotiations to the unexpected betrayal. My thoughts were completely absorbed. I didn't even notice that a man took the seat next to me until he held out his hand to me. "Hi, I'm James, the general manager of Marriott," he greeted me. When we shook hands, I introduced myself as Alex Thompson. "I've booked conference room L122 for today." James confirmed this information and then asked, "I noticed how you were photographing a couple who had just arrived. Are you familiar with them?" After a short pause, I replied, "I know this woman. I suppose you were surprised to see her with a male companion?" James asked. I expressed my surprise to James, and he asked if he could be honest. After getting permission, James expressed concern about possible trouble if I stayed in this place. I assured him that I had never been in trouble before. Despite the possibility of confrontation, I promised that I would leave without disturbing the guests. James looked around the room, noting its calm atmosphere. Then he handed me a folded piece of paper. Unfolding the paper, I found the man's name and address printed on it. James asked, "Do you think there will be fewer conflicts now that you have this information?" I held out my hand and answered confidently, "I'm pretty sure." When I returned to work, I managed to do an amazing amount despite the fact that I was constantly looking at the elevator. After almost 3 hours, Lisa and her companion finally got out of the elevator. I quickly packed my bag and approached them. When they had only taken a few steps, I held my mobile phone to my face and took pictures as I approached the couple. Lisa was confused at first, but when I lowered the camera, her jaw dropped and she turned noticeably pale. "I would hug you as usual, but," I joked. "Alex, what the hell are you doing here?" Lisa asked. "I came to a meeting. Why are you here?" I could see that Lisa was trying to calm down. She paused and said, "Alex, I want you to meet my colleague. We work together. We are here to inspect several conference rooms for an upcoming event that our agency is hosting." I looked at the man as he held out his hand to me. "Nice to meet you, Alex. My name is David," he said, and I ignored his outstretched hand, turned to him and asked, "David, right? May I ask you something?" David and Lisa exchanged intense glances before I continued. "Do you think Lisa looks more attractive in those skinny, stylish jeans, tight blouse, and boots? Do you remember what a tight black dress she was wearing when you went to the 8th floor 3 hours ago to check the meeting rooms?" Before they could gather their thoughts, I looked at David's left hand and noticed the wedding ring. "This is a great wedding ring, David. It seems like you're just as much a lying and cheating scumbag as my dear sister-in-law." David's face turned red and he hissed, "Listen, you don't know what's going on. Stay out of this or I'll kick your ass." I shook my head and replied, "I'm sorry to upset you, David. My sister-in-law's affair with a nobody like you definitely bothers me." I calmly crossed my arms behind my back and added, "As for kicking ass, don't be shy. Just keep in mind that I won't hold back defensively. As soon as you make a move, I will definitely teach you a lesson, send you to the hospital, and then inform the authorities." I stopped talking and grinned. David looked at Lisa and snapped. Without waiting for an answer, he rushed to the front door of the hotel. When David left, I couldn't help but warn him, "If I were you, I'd tell your wife." I paused and turned to look at Lisa, emphasizing, Please sort this out, Lisa. After David left the hotel, Lisa turned to me, put her hand on my arm and asked, Alex, can we go to the bar and have a drink? I was tempted to join her, but after a little thought, I quickly decided to give up. I'm sorry, Lisa, I said. I wasted a few hours waiting for you to finish your passionate party. Lisa flinched when I spoke. I need to go home, have a drink, and think about how to tell Michael and David's wife. She squeezed my hand and pleaded, I only do this when Michael is not at home. It doesn't mean anything. I looked into her eyes and asked, How long have you known me, Lisa? She was silent, but her gaze was intense. It's been about 12 years since I first met Sarah back in high school. Does that seem accurate to you? After a tense pause, I angrily attacked Lisa, asking why she thought I wouldn't tell my brother about his wife's treacherous actions. As I was heading out, I noticed James, the hotel manager, nodding gratefully at me. I walked through the revolving front door and started my way home, heading north on I-5 where there was no traffic during rush hour. I set the cruise control to 78 miles per hour and turned up the volume on the country music station. While I was driving, the only obstacle was the incessant beeping and ringing of my mobile phone, which meant that my wife was urgently trying to contact me. I drove into the garage, closed the door behind me, and got out of the car. Sarah, my wife, was waiting for me in the doorway that connected the garage to the kitchen of the apartment. Where have you been? What is it? She asked as I walked past her and entered the kitchen. After laying out my work supplies on the countertop, I noticed Sarah's cell phone lying on the kitchen table next to a half-empty glass of wine. Curious, I took the phone, entered the password on the keyboard, and opened access to her text messages. It was obvious that she had read the message I had sent a few hours ago and had paid attention to it. You know where I've been. You read the message. That's not what I meant, and you know it? I said, then went into the room to pour myself a bourbon. Tell me, what do you mean? Back in the kitchen, Sarah sat down at the table. She asked, How did you upset Lisa? As far as I know, I haven't done anything to upset Lisa, but Lisa, on the contrary, upset me a lot. I watched Sarah gather her thoughts, sitting across from me. Did you know that Lisa was cheating on Michael? My direct question caught her off guard. She said it was only once, Sarah replied. Well, that's a lie. I informed Sarah that Lisa had told me that she had only cheated on Michael when he was on the road. After a short pause, I continued, I see that you have bypassed my question. Do you know that your brother's wife is unfaithful to Michael? Sarah took a sip of wine and replied, Alex, this is Michael and Lisa's case. I nodded and said, I agree this is really Michael and Lisa's case, but it bothers me that Michael doesn't know about a serious problem that needs to be solved. Sarah suddenly exploded. Damn it. It's none of your business. I want you to keep your mouth shut. I came closer and leaned my elbows on the kitchen table, clasping my hands in a prayer gesture. I turned to Sarah. You know me well, Sarah. You know me better than anyone else. Sarah expected more and was amazed when I suddenly got up and rushed to the kitchen archway. After pausing for a moment, I finally turned back to her. I asked you twice if you knew about Lisa's cheating, and both times you evaded the answer. I'll ask you again. How long have you known? I mentioned that Lisa has always been a bit reckless. Sarah predictably did not understand my obvious answer. She asked, What does that even mean? It means that you don't want to answer a question that, in my opinion, is extremely important for our marriage, I said firmly. What Lisa does when Michael is not at home has nothing to do with our marriage, Sarah said firmly. Let's think about it. I leaned against the arch and counted on my fingers. First of all, my relationship with your brother's wife will never be the same now that I know that she is a lying woman. And every holiday that we celebrate with your family, I will be reminded of Lisa's betrayal. Secondly, you have shown me that you know about her malicious actions, and I can only wonder if you approve of them. Alex, it's not fair, Sarah said. Also, although I don't travel as often as Michael, I go on one trip every month. Is it really the first time in a relationship that I have to think about whether you're cheating on me? Sarah's eyes widened and she blushed, expressing her disbelief at being accused of cheating. I quickly intervened, explaining that I had never accused her of infidelity, but the way she reacted so calmly to her sister-in-law's misdeeds made me doubt her own actions. I paused and looked sternly at my wife before speaking. We both know that you can't prove that you didn't cheat. All I have is my trust in you, and now that trust has been severely shaken. I turned around and headed down the hall to my home office. After making sure that David Garrett was married and intercepting calls to his home phone, I reluctantly moved on to the last difficult task. I sent my brother Michael a text asking if he would come home on Friday. It took 10 minutes before he answered, "I will arrive at 2:30 p.m. Let's meet at the coffee shop at 4 o'clock. Does this have something to do with Lisa's frantic call? I was thinking about the answer when suddenly my phone rang. I picked up the phone and greeted Michael, turning in my chair so that Sarah couldn't hear me through the closed door. "Alex, what's the matter?" Michael asked. "It's as bad as it can be," I replied. "Are you sure you want to talk about this on the phone?" Michael hesitated before asking, "Is she cheating on me?" I answered simply, "Yes." There was silence on the line, interrupted only by periodic sobs. "I'll meet you at the coffee shop," he finally said, after which he suddenly ended the conversation. I thought about contacting Michael, offering my support and listening to him, but in the end I decided to leave him alone. I believed that he understood that I would be there for him when he needed me. While I was talking to Michael, Sarah fell silent, probably trying to eavesdrop on our conversation. When I hung up, I heard her say through the closed door, "Please come up to the kitchen. We need to talk." Actually, I was going to go to the guest bedroom, but decided to finish my bourbon while sitting at the kitchen table. Settling into the chair opposite Sarah, I took a satisfied sip, enjoying the warmth spreading down my throat. I watched my wife, noting the frantic thoughts running through her head while she was preparing for the next attack. I felt exhausted. I had almost no strength left to resist, and I knew that more alcohol would not help. I was already anticipating Sarah's upcoming attack when suddenly the phone in my pocket vibrated. In a rage, I pulled it out and looked at the screen, seeing an unfamiliar number which only aggravated my already intense disappointment. Abruptly picking up the phone, the woman on the other end introduced herself as Colleen Garrett and apologized for calling so late. "Someone from this number called me at home twice tonight. These calls upset my husband very much, and I suspect that the caller was trying to reach me," she said. Sighing, I told her, "Colleen, my name is Alex Thompson. I called earlier and wanted to talk to you." In a somewhat gloomy tone, Colleen said, "Let me guess. Did you call to tell me that my husband is cheating on me with your wife?" "Get to the point," I told her. "He's cheating with my sister-in-law. Her name is Lisa Palmer, and I think they work together." She didn't answer right away. "This is the third such call, and it will be the last," she said. "How can a man do this to his wife and 4 children?" It was obvious that her question was rhetorical, so I decided to intervene anyway. "I have evidence that they were together at the Seattle Marriott Hotel downtown, kissed in the elevator, and returned to the lobby 3 hours later. Lisa was wearing different clothes after they returned to the hall together." The conversation mostly consisted of exchanging email addresses and promising to send photos the next morning. When the conversation ended, Sarah mentioned that Lisa had told her that he was in an open marriage, but that was not true. His wife and 4 children believed that they were in a monogamous relationship and lived a happy family life. Sarah looked surprised and covered her face with her hands. I added that this was not the first time she had caught him cheating and was going to divorce him. Sarah stared at me in shock. I swirled the last portion of bourbon in my glass and tipped it into my mouth. After rinsing the glass in the sink, I headed to our bedroom. Lying in bed and thinking about everything that had happened to my extended family over the past few hours, I had come to the conclusion that I was not to blame for all this grief and destruction. As usual, my alarm went off at 5 o'clock in the morning. Instead of starting the day with exercises in our basement gym, I took a quick shower, got dressed, and went to work. I wasn't trying to run away from Sarah. I had to go to the office to finish the design memorandum and send it to Tony. Thursday turned out to be hectic. Tony and I spent 45 minutes on the phone to clarify some details, but I managed to send a finished agreement to my boss before noon. After lunch, I checked the emails I received the day before and went home at 5 o'clock in the evening at my usual time. I was wondering what was waiting for me in the evening, and I was only slightly surprised by what awaited me. As I turned onto our street, I noticed Lisa in her parents' car parked in front of my house. "It's going to be a long, long night," I moaned, pressing the button to open the garage door. "What the hell did you say to Michael?" Lisa started when I closed the door behind me. Looking at my frightened wife, I said, "I'm going to change my clothes. I'll be back in a few minutes. But I warn you that if your family disrespects me in my house, I will physically throw everyone out the front door. This also applies to you, Sarah." Without waiting for an answer, I quickly headed down the hall to our bedroom. After standing there and thinking about escaping through the window like a coward, I finally made the decision to confront Sarah and her family. It was hard for me to forget about the seductively open bottle of bourbon, but I knew it was better to keep a clear mind. But my resolve quickly evaporated, and I found myself back at the bar, choosing a drink that would be enough to relieve tension but not too much so as not to disrupt the ability to conduct a polite conversation. I settled on a generous portion of my favorite amber liquid. When I reappeared in the kitchen, all eyes were on me. Everyone was sitting at the table. There was an empty seat between Sarah and her father, Steve. Instead of sitting down, I leaned against the kitchen counter, watched the group, and moistened my lips with my drink. I liked my in-laws. They were good, respected people. Steve, my father-in-law, was a man I respected. He was direct, honest, and you always knew what he thought of you. If you stayed by his side, you couldn't find a better friend in the world. On the other hand, if you crossed his path, I was sure that he was capable of making your life miserable. Steve considered Michael and me as friends. My mother-in-law Betty considered herself a savvy businesswoman and an extraordinary entrepreneur. She owned and operated a well-known local real estate franchise with an excellent reputation. Although Betty, my mother-in-law, oversaw the day-to-day running of the business, everyone involved knew that Steve was the strategic mind behind her success. "Maybe it's better to sit here." Sarah patted the chair next to her. "I've been sitting all day. I feel good where I am." Lisa seemed to be in better control of her emotions when she asked, "What did you say to Michael?" After a short pause to collect my thoughts, I told them that I had sent him a text with an urgent request for a meeting after his return home. Michael called, concerned about the urgency of the situation, and I told him the news that you were cheating on him. His emotional reaction was obvious. He shed tears before agreeing to meet with me. I was shocked by how devastated the family was. Sarah burst into tears and said, "I asked you to mind your own business." I asked if her statement was aimed at the benefit of her family. I replied that it was my business. My mother-in-law jumped up and said it was controversial. Before I could comment, Lisa asked, "Are you going to meet Michael tomorrow?" "I'm going to," I replied. "What are you going to tell him?" She asked that I replied that I had nothing more to say to him. I sent the photos I took and told him that you were with David for a little less than 3 hours. I sent him David's name and address. I think I'll be a support and a shoulder to cry on. "What about me, Alex?" Lisa asked. "Don't I deserve support too?" I smiled, looking around the table. "It looks like you have enough support, Lisa. I will stand by Michael on this issue." "How do you know that Michael doesn't cheat on Lisa while he's traveling?" "It's common for married men to cheat away from home," commented Betty, Lisa's mother. "I can't imagine Michael doing something like that," I replied to Betty, defending Michael. To be honest, I have to admit that I have no idea how he behaves when he's not at home. Until yesterday, I never thought that Lisa was a cheater or that my wife could cheat on me. The table exploded. How dare you? And this is unacceptable. Sarah was visibly shocked by my statement, so I jumped up and continued. At least I was honest and told Sarah about it last night. Her cavalier and dismissive attitude towards Lisa's infidelity worries me. Steve, my wife's father, told me, Sarah has never cheated on you. I can't believe you think so badly of her. Steve finished. I knew I had to be careful what I said next. I didn't want to turn Steve against me. I deliberately lowered the volume and sharpness of my voice, looked Steve in the eye, and challenged him. Prove it. After a few moments of silence, I continued, That's the point, Steve. You can't prove that Sarah didn't cheat on me. Despite his protests, I insisted that I had trusted Sarah completely for the past 6 years. I told her last night that my trust in her had been shaken. That's not fair, Alex. I intervened before Sarah could finish. Last night I asked you 3 times if you knew that Lisa cheated on Michael. You haven't answered my question. Instead, you changed the subject. You're not lying, but you're doing it dishonestly. Yes, I looked at Sarah when she confessed. I knew about Lisa's affairs. I didn't support her, but I didn't want to make a big deal out of a molehill, for example, this one. She spread her hands, pointing out our current problems. I was so hoping that her business would go on as usual and Michael wouldn't find out. I nodded. Although I was very upset that Sarah was hiding her sister-in-law's infidelity, I could understand that she was protecting her family. Do you remember our conversation about how we should be exclusive a few weeks before you proposed to me? Sarah asked. When I nodded, she looked me straight in the eye and said, I promised that after our conversation, I would have neither romantic nor intimate relations. Moreover, I haven't been with another man since we started dating after college. Despite my suspicions, I still saw the same angelic woman I married 5 years ago when she said those words. I love you and trust you, I assured my wife. There was a slight pause while her family considered my answer. It was clear that Steve was pleased with the result. When Betty asked, What are you going to do with Michael? My answer was simple. I will support my best friend, just as you all support Lisa. Michael deserves our support, and I intend to give it to him. Over the next 6 weeks, Michael had a hard time. He moved from his house to an apartment nearby and began divorce proceedings with Lisa. Although he quickly filed for an official divorce, he was hesitant to start the actual process. During this period, I regularly met Michael for dinner on Wednesdays, and Sarah spent time with her sister-in-law. One Tuesday afternoon, when I was having lunch with colleagues at Clyde's barbecue bar, a man suddenly joined our table and said to me, Hey, I bet you forgot about me. It took a moment before I recognized the man standing in front of me. Hi, David, I said. I heard that Colleen dumped you. What does it feel like to be a negligent father? He grinned and replied, Go to hell, Alex. It's your fault. I looked at my friends Carl and Joe, who were expecting a confrontation. Returning my attention to David, I replied, Yes, it looks like I'm to blame for your divorce. David chuckled and admitted, I think I played a part in it too, but there are so many married women around that I can't be faithful. I was already starting to feel uncomfortable when David continued, It seems that I have problems with self-control, especially when it comes to married women. I need to pursue them. David nudged Carl to his right. I did the same with Lisa, his sister-in-law, when her husband left town. I turned her into my personal companion, and I shared and exchanged her with friends. It was incredibly popular, and we've been using this arrangement for over a year. She enjoyed every moment she spent with me and my friends. Just when I was thinking about ending things with her, I unexpectedly bumped into her and her attractive sister-in-law at a happy hour party. It was clear from the grin on his face that this encounter was not in vain. He reached into his back pocket, took out an envelope, and casually dropped it on the table next to my plate. Photos are usually stored in such envelopes. The grin on David's face conveyed everything I needed to know about the contents of the envelope. I must admit, my heart felt like it was torn into 1,000 pieces. There's no way I'm going to let this jerk see that I'm broken. I quickly grabbed the envelope and put it in my jacket pocket. David tried to make fun of me by asking if I was going to show our friends photos of my wife and her sister-in-law with his friends. He boasted that he had been involved with my wife for several months and described her behavior in inappropriate detail. Laughing, he mentioned recordings of her in compromising situations, saying she enjoyed being treated poorly. He laughed again. "What's the matter? Don't you have anything to say?" I gritted my teeth, but I had to answer. I said, "You're probably the dumbest person in the world." He was still grinning from ear to ear when I told him that when I gave Lisa's husband Michael these photos, he would sue him. "Since you were Lisa's direct supervisor, how long do you think it will take before you're sued? In your company, you will be out of work in a week." It was difficult, but I started laughing. This idiot realized that he had underestimated me and began to think about his next move. When I said, "Do you know that I grew up in this city? What difference does it make to me where you grew up?" This was big trouble, but I took my time. "I know every mover and shaker in the city." David didn't look very impressed, so I continued, "And I also know the nastiest pieces of it. I would like to advise you to leave the city while your legs are still working. Go to hell. I'm not afraid of you. I have witnesses that you are threatening me." He pointed at Carl and Joe. They both laughed, and Joe said, "He really doesn't understand anything." Then I continued to paint a gloomy picture of David's future. Divorce, loss of custody of children, loss of work, alimony and child benefits, as well as potential physical danger. David, not at all embarrassed, confidently pushed back his chair, stood up and answered, "Go to hell, you freak. You're just a fool with a cheating wife." When David left, leaving me confused, I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the situation. Later, when I was sitting in my office and trying to make sense of it all, these words kept ringing in my head. I couldn't believe what I saw in the photos. It was just terrible for a happily married man like me. The pictures showed Sarah with several different men in compromising situations. In one photo, she was surrounded by multiple people in inappropriate circumstances. In another series of pictures, Lisa performed similar actions. The recordings were even more disturbing, and I felt crushed. Sarah and Lisa were expected to be the center of attention during inappropriate gatherings. The sounds of inappropriate requests still haunted me. Pulling myself together and putting aside strong emotions of sadness, I texted Michael and asked to meet him for dinner. Feeling that I needed additional support, I also texted another friend to join us. Tears welled up in my eyes as I sat down at the table, making plans for the evening. I didn't want to meet Sarah, and I needed to avoid our meeting. I traveled a lot for work, and almost every month I had planned both regular trips and unexpected urgent ones. I sent Sarah a message saying there was a problem with Whitaker's account and that I was heading to the airport that evening. Michael and I had a quiet dinner together. We ordered a few beers, and I gave him the photos David had given me earlier. Michael was as upset as I was. We both agreed that divorce was the best solution for us and discussed the idea of suing the insurance agency where Lisa and David worked. In the end, we decided to heed the advice of our divorce lawyers. We had been sitting at the table for over an hour when Sam Mello came into the bar. He looked around the room, saw me, and came towards us. Along the way, he stopped to greet and chat with various people at other tables. Sam was older than Michael and me, and his daughter Trish was in school a grade below me. He owned a large auto salvage warehouse on the outskirts of the city. I remembered a summer day 15 years ago when I was 16 years old and practiced my serve on the tennis courts near the high school. Trish waved at me as she rode her bike past the playground. A few minutes later, as I was picking up the balls scattered around the court, I looked up and saw 5 classmates forcibly pushing Trish under the bleachers of the baseball field 100 yards away. I could guess what they were thinking, and I knew that Trish wasn't that kind of girl. I ran out of the court, and in a few seconds I was already under the stands. Trish's t-shirt was torn. She screamed, cried, and tried to cover herself while the bullies were pulling at her shorts. Stan Malloy turned around just in time for the tip of my racket to hit his nose, causing it to burst with blood. Blood sprayed in all directions, and Stan screamed in pain as he fell to the ground. My backhand hit Joey Burns on the cheek and knocked him out cold. The details of what happened next remain in my memory. The remaining 3 troublemakers grabbed me and beat me mercilessly while I was lying down. After delivering the last few blows, they fled the scene in a panic while Trish continued to sob. I tried to regain my composure. We left her bike in the field, and she helped me get back to the car. Despite my shaking condition, I managed to get home. Before the car had completely stopped, Trish jumped out of the seat and hurried inside, still in tears. I had to get out of the car and walk around her to close the door, which she had left ajar. Just as I was closing the door, a loud crack caught my attention, and I turned to see a large man with a menacing expression approaching me. As he approached, he noticed the injuries on my face and the hunched posture. "Are you Trish's friend?" he growled. I could barely nod. I told him I think I need an ambulance, Mr. Mello. I leaned against the car and slowly and painfully sank to the ground. Mr. Mello knelt down next to me, took my chin in his hand, and turned my head so that our eyes met. "What the hell happened to my daughter?" Mello asked. "Some boys dragged her under the bleachers on the baseball field. Was that you?" he demanded. I sighed and shook my head. "I've been practicing on the tennis court nearby." His every word felt like a blow. His eyes were blazing with anger as he asked, "What did those bastards do to her?" When I arrived, they had already taken off her shirt and were trying to take off her shorts. Despite the pain I was in, I knew that his piercing gaze would have scared me if I hadn't been so focused on helping her. "I need their names. Stan Malloy and Joey Burns will be waiting at the hospital when I arrive." I used my racket to hit them. When the ambulance and the police car arrived, I called the names of 3 more troublemakers. Mr. Mello came close to me. Our noses were almost touching, and I could smell garlic on his breath. He said in a low voice, "If you ever need a favor, come to the village of Mello." When Sam joined us at the table, he sat down without any introductions. I handed him the envelope with the photos and waited for him to look through them. When he looked up at me, I said, "There's a man here named David Garrett. He works for Jimmy Sullivan's insurance agency. His hobby is to catch married women for his own pleasure and then share them with his friends. In the photos I showed you, he and his gang are with my wife and my brother's wife." Sam nodded understandingly, and I continued, "I hope he gets punished. His gait will become less athletic, and he will have problems with mobility." The 3 of us sat in silence for a few minutes before Sam said a word. "Since you're both going to be single soon, it makes sense to join the gym. You can decide that you will go straight to the gym every evening after work. You can work out together for a few hours and then go somewhere and have a delicious dinner." He looked carefully at our confused faces. But before we could continue, he asked, "Do you 2 think you can come up with a reliable alibi for every evening?" After making sure we understood his point, he rolled his eyes, nodded at me, got up and left the bar. Instead of heading home as I had originally planned, lying to Sarah that I was out of town, I decided to stay the night at a nearby Marriott hotel. I was able to talk directly with my boss, giving him a brief outline of my problems. He agreed to let me work remotely and told me to send an email to his team informing them that I would be on a business trip within the next week. Feeling tired, I sank into an uncomfortable chair in the corner of the hotel room and plunged into its depths. I closed my eyes and thought about the last few weeks. It became clear to me that because of my tough stance towards her sister-in-law, Sarah couldn't admit to her affair with David and friends. She was sure that I would divorce her, and she was right. And yet, as I pondered the idea of ending our marriage, I couldn't help but wonder if I would have been fair if she had been honest with me from the beginning. Instead, Sarah chose to continue lying to me. It was only when I discovered her betrayal in front of friends and colleagues that the truth finally became clear. I couldn't imagine a more disrespectful and humiliating situation than the one I found myself in, sitting across from my wife's lover and learning about her participation in group adventures. Her actions were incredibly unfair to me, so the chances of an honest divorce were slim. Instead of seeking an amicable separation, I vowed to take revenge on Sarah. I was determined to destroy the woman who had once been my wife, my love, and my best friend. A peaceful divorce was not an option for Sarah and me. I struggled out of my chair, went to the desk in the corner of the hotel room, and began to develop my strategy until almost 1:30 a.m. I outlined my plans for how to behave with my cheating wife in our upcoming divorce. If my plan doesn't work, it will break her heart. But if everything turns out the way I expected, she will remain completely broken. The next day, I managed to arrange a meeting with a divorce lawyer. Despite the advice of a lawyer, I decided to postpone the division of our finances for now. I checked into a long-stay hotel and set up a remote office. I decided not to answer Sarah's calls and texts until Friday. I informed her that I was going away for the weekend. Sarah's reaction was extremely upset. She called and begged me to call her all weekend. Over the weekend, I managed to gather everything I needed for the project. Having finished with the checklist, I went on a long hike in the mountains on Sunday. Back at the hotel, I turned on my phone and found a lot of messages and missed calls from Sarah, along with her family and several colleagues. She frantically tried to reach me. She was upset that I was out of sight and was determined to find me. On Monday and Tuesday, I worked in my hotel room to complete all the business before leaving the office. The next day, I returned home on Wednesday. After leaving the hotel and making sure that Sarah's car was at work, I discreetly put a GPS tracking device under her seat. It took several hours to install the necessary equipment and props at home, and by the beginning of the day, I had already finished. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I lit a fire in our living room fireplace. Sarah and I often liked to sit by the fire on a winter weekend evening. We sipped wine, talked, cuddled up to each other, and looked at the flames in the fireplace. But today was not a cool February day. It was September. I waited until 3 o'clock in the afternoon and texted Sarah that I had just arrived home. My phone rang, and I ignored Sarah's call by sending it to voicemail. Instead of leaving a message, she texted me. I was watching the GPS indicator on my laptop, waiting for Sarah to leave work, but she didn't leave right away. Determined to prove her case, she postponed her departure. While I was putting logs on the fire, the room was getting hotter and hotter. When the GPS showed that Sarah started her journey home at 5:05 p.m., the temperature in the living room became unbearable, exceeding 100 degrees Fahrenheit. I resigned myself to the discomfort. My resolve strengthened. I waited for her arrival, adjusting myself to the right mood. There was a brief pause as Sarah opened the garage door and entered the kitchen. I felt her presence while she was standing in the hallway, and then she finally came into the living room and found me sitting on the couch and looking at the fire. There were cheese and crackers on the table in front of us, as well as a bottle of wine. I raised my glass of wine, ready for what was about to happen. There was a second glass at the far end of the table meant for Sarah. "What are you doing?" she exclaimed, feeling unbearably hot. I turned away from the fire to look at her face and answered, "Don't you see? I have prepared a romantic reception for my wife." 2 beads of sweat ran down her forehead and cheek. She hesitated, and the word romantic froze in the air. Without finishing her sentence, she walked closer to the fire, sinking to the ground. She picked up a charred object from the floor, examined it carefully, and then looked at the top shelf of the bookcase. Fearing that she might recoil, I watched as she turned to face me and her eyes filled with horror as she showed the partially burned cover of the book. I expected her to be too shocked to speak, So I calmly explained that we had run out of wood and I used some old books to light the fire. I gestured to an empty space on the highest shelf where Sarah kept a collection of books, most of which I had never touched. There were many others that we could use to light a bonfire. While we were talking, I got up from the couch, took a glass of wine from the table, and handed it to Sarah. I watched her face reflect different emotions from confusion to anger. On her birthday, Sarah's father gave her a favorite children's book written a year earlier. On the first blank page, he wrote a sincere message for Sarah, sharing his aspirations and ideas about his daughter, presenting her with the same birthday present every year. She had 28 books at her disposal, each of which was a sign of her father's love, and she treasured these gifts very much. My jaw clenched when Sarah let out a loud scream and made a sudden movement in my direction. It is not known whether she wanted to slap me or hit me, but the blow of her hand on my face was painful. Her nails dug into my cheek, and her hand collided with my left eye, causing a sharp pain. Wine from 2 glasses spilled on my clothes, soaking my shirt and trousers. Her expression changed again, and tears welled up in her eyes. I saw complete confusion again. Without saying a word, she turned and ran up the stairs to our bedroom on the 2nd floor. I heard the door close behind her. Although I was devastated because I knew my marriage was over, I was still smiling. My plan worked perfectly. When I looked in the bathroom mirror, I saw that my eye was red and began to swell. Sarah's nails pierced the skin, and a trickle of blood ran down my cheek. Let's get this over with, I told myself as I took my cell phone out of my pocket and dialed 911. What's the matter with you? I heard on the other end of the line. My name is Alex Thompson, and I need police help with a domestic situation. My wife physically assaulted me, I said. After telling the dispatcher my address, she asked, "Are you in a safe place, Mr. Thompson?" "Yes, I am." My wife locked herself in her bedroom. "I'll be waiting on the porch until the police arrive," I replied. The dispatcher asked, "Do you need medical help?" "No, I didn't get any serious injuries," I replied. The dispatcher remained on the line until the first police car arrived. I diligently answered her questions, knowing that my conversation was being recorded. Shortly after the first patrol car pulled up, a second one appeared. 3 policemen came towards me across the grass. "Thank you for coming, officers. What happened?" An experienced veteran officer asked. I turned my head to show the damage on the left side. "My wife Sarah hit me," I explained. The officer asked, "Why did she hit you?" I wanted to be careful in my response. In the last few months, my wife had started verbally abusing me. I suspect that she is in a state of conflict. She's having an affair that she thinks I don't know about. In fact, I was planning to hand her the divorce papers tonight. "When we talk to your wife, will we find any damage?" he asked. One of the young officers asked. "Are there any weapons in your house?" "I have some guns. All the weapons are stored in a safe in my office, and my wife doesn't know the combination," I replied. When 2 young officers came to my house to talk to Sarah, I turned to the 3rd officer and asked, "Do you want to watch a video of my wife hitting me?" He looked puzzled for a moment and then asked, "Do you have evidence of the attack?" "I haven't looked at it yet, but I think I have proof," I replied, asking him to follow me. I led him to the kitchen where my laptop was on the table. I needed to wake up my computer and find a cloud storage account to show the video. I opened the folder, rewound the video 30 minutes ago, and found the beginning of our confrontation. I pressed the play button and stepped aside so that the policeman could see what was happening. He watched until Sarah left the room and ran upstairs, and then I asked him to look again. After the second viewing, he pressed the communicator button on his shoulder and said, "Arrest Mrs. Thompson." Almost immediately I heard Sarah's screams coming from above, and my heart started pounding. I knew the officer had asked me a question, but I needed him to repeat it. "Are all the rooms in your house under video surveillance?" He asked. It was a series of questions that I didn't want to get into, but I knew I had to answer honestly. "No, the living room is the only room with a camera," I said. He nodded his head understandingly, scratched his chin, and thought. "How long have you had a camera in your living room?" he asked. I shrugged my shoulders and admitted that it had appeared quite recently. Our duel of looks was interrupted when Sarah screamed and begged, "Alex, what the hell is going on? Please help me." I was about to answer when one of the young officers shouted, "Sir, this is a police investigation. Please leave the room immediately," addressing an elderly man standing in the open front door of my house. With the same authority, the man said, "I am the official bailiff, and I am here to serve papers to Mrs. Sarah Thompson." He walked over to Sarah, and all three officers stepped forward in case the situation got out of hand. The man asked, "Are you Sarah Thompson?" When Sarah nodded, he held out an envelope and said, "Sarah Thompson, you have received a notification. In addition to the divorce application, there is a restraining order prohibiting you from approaching Mr. Alexander Thompson, his home, and work." Since Sarah was handcuffed, he handed the envelope to the officer who was holding Sarah's elbow. When the bailiff left, I turned to Sarah. I saw the panic and confusion disappear from her face, replaced by calmness. She looked at me and asked, "How did you know?" "David told me," I said. Two junior officers escorted Sarah to the back seat of the patrol car. After receiving the third officer's business card, he asked me to send him a copy of the video. When I entered through the front door, I saw Sarah being taken away in the first car. The senior officer stopped halfway to my entrance. He turned around and asked, "I saw you at the coffee shop sometimes, didn't I?" "Yes, I recognized you, Sergeant," I replied. He told me that he divorced his wife many years ago for cheating. "I pay alimony, child support, health insurance, and a mortgage on the house she lives in with my kids and her boyfriend. Maybe the next time I see you at the coffee shop, you'll let me buy you a beer and tell me what the hell happened here today." Despite the chaos of this week, I found solace in going to work the next day, and on Thursday and Friday I managed to be somewhat productive. But my relief quickly turned to disappointment when I returned home on Friday evening and saw my father-in-law sitting on the front step. When I pulled into the garage, I couldn't resist asking him, "What brings you here, Steve?" I poured 2 large glasses of Knob Creek bourbon, and we sat down at the kitchen table. We sipped our drinks slowly for many minutes before he asked, "Is she cheating too?" I just nodded. "Is there any hope?" he wanted to know. I took 2 more slow sips before I managed to calm down enough to be kind and respectful to Steve. I replied that this had happened more than once and to more than one man. I took another sip and then told Steve the whole truth. "And it wasn't with just one man," I added. He looked at me in disbelief, and before he could answer, I told him I saw photos and videos that made me feel sick. Steve slumped in his chair and turned white. A tear ran down his cheek. We sat together for a long time, each of us immersed in our own thoughts and memories. Sarah and Lisa didn't learn this behavior from either their mother or me. His intense gaze was just icy cold. It took a few more minutes before Steve got to his feet and walked around the table. He hugged me tightly and sighed against my shoulder. Releasing me, he walked towards the door with the gait of a 90-year-old man. When he opened the door, he looked over his shoulder and said, "Burning those books was a shitty thing to do." I had completely forgotten about the trick I used to start an argument with Sarah. I almost screamed when I said, "Wait a minute." I left the kitchen and returned a few seconds later with a small box. I handed it to Steve. When he opened it, he looked at me with a stunned expression on his face. "I know that you value these books, and I would never destroy them," I said to him. "How?" He was too shocked to finish his thought. I told him that I went to the bookstore and bought 1 copy of each book. That Saturday morning, as usual, I was sitting at the kitchen table and scanning our local newspaper on a tablet. I smiled when I read it. Seattle Times local section. West Seattle police are investigating a violent attack on a local man as he was leaving a nearby bar in the Georgetown neighborhood. David Garrett was attacked in the back parking lot of Murphy's Pub around 10:30 p.m. His injuries are extensive and require hospitalization. A police spokesman said that the police have several leads and they expect an arrest soon. It was a bright and sunny November morning. I watched as a red Ford SUV parked a few spots away from me, and the driver slowly got out of the car. "Hi, David. You look like hell." I was standing in the parking lot in front of Jackson Physical Therapy and sat on the open back door of my pickup truck. The bird had informed me that David had an appointment for 10:30 a.m. I continued, "It would be nice if you had a disabled badge so you could park closer to the building, like other cripples." In addition to injuries to his knees and feet, David had a shattered jaw which would be wired shut for at least another month. "Does a cat have your tongue?" I asked with a grin. I have to give David his due. Despite his limp and leaning on a cane, he came up to me and stopped about 10 feet away. He knew that Michael and I had been questioned by the police and cleared of suspicion, but deep down he knew that we were involved in his beating. And now, standing in front of him, he received confirmation. There was hatred in his eyes, and he probably imagined unspeakable acts of revenge that would last for months. I was sure that David and I would cross paths again in the future, so I took it upon myself to organize this meeting. I didn't want to spend the rest of my days looking over my shoulder, so I decided to meet him face to face. David slowly turned around and took the first step. Marie Garrett from Milford, Connecticut. When he turned around, I continued. Susan Berg from White Plains, New York, and Lori Fitzpatrick from Brockton, Massachusetts. The hatred in his eyes was replaced by confusion. If anything happens to me, if I get into a plane crash, drown during my vacation, fall down the stairs, I have arranged with my friends to visit your mother and sisters. I noticed a slight tremor in his hand. My friends will beat their faces like yours. They will kick them in the legs like they beat you. And David. I wanted to make sure he was listening carefully. I waited a few moments for him to digest the information before finishing. David looked at me for a few long moments and then nodded quickly. I couldn't tell if he was nodding in agreement or as a sign of a ceasefire. He turned and walked unsteadily towards the entrance of the building. Fortunately, that was the last time I ran into David Garrett. I had already given my divorce lawyer the right to resolve all legal issues related to our separation. Since we had no children, our incomes were similar, and my main task was to distance myself from Sarah. The process went smoothly. A few weeks after the breakup with Sarah, my lawyer contacted me. She informed me that we had reached an agreement almost exactly on the terms we had discussed, and yet Sarah wouldn't sign the document until she got a chance to talk to me. I muttered some profanity and was advised to just do it, sit down and let her talk. Let's get this over with. Here's what I agreed to. Let Sarah sign the papers and you approve everything so that everything is official. I will meet with her within an hour in the conference room of your office after she signs the papers. I heard that everything was going to work out, and the call ended. It took 3 days before I found myself in the conference room. June, the paralegal, knocked on the door, came in, and informed me that everything was signed and notarized. Nodding, she stepped back to make room for Sarah. Despite the fact that she was clearly trying to get dressed and put on makeup, Sarah's appearance did not matter to me at all. She was still attractive even in a hoodie and a ponytail. Walking around the table, she leaned over and kissed me on the cheek, and then took the seat opposite me. "Are you as nervous as I am?" she asked at first. I thought it was a strange way to start a conversation, but then I thought about her question. I shrugged and admitted, "I'm not nervous. I'm more worried. I want to end this and move on with my life." Tears ran down her cheek when she said she was being blackmailed. David was going to put a video of Lisa on the internet. Her father called me at the very beginning of the divorce process and said the same thing, so I wasn't surprised. Perhaps it all started with blackmail, but I watched the video. I've seen you with others 1,000 times, and they were real. You begged for more. You begged every second. I was getting angry by the second and needed to calm down. After a few minutes, I continued, "You may have felt compelled, but that's no reason to ruin our marriage. If you find out that Lisa is cheating on her husband, it doesn't mean that you have to turn yourself into the same thing." I was so disappointed and didn't see any other way out. "What was I supposed to do?" she asked. "You could and should have trusted me." I got angry when Sarah rolled her eyes. I continued, "If we had gone to the police with Lisa, we would have had a chance to collect evidence. We'll never know for sure, but at least his wife and employer would have been informed of his actions, which would have given us some satisfaction. And most importantly, we would be united in opposing this together. Unfortunately, you have decided not to believe in me." "I do not know if you were there at all," Sarah said. "What kind of nonsense are you talking about?" I asked. I answered the question with a question. "Do you remember why we broke up the first time?" "The first time? You mean in school?" Sarah looked completely confused. "What does this have to do with the case?" "In high school, you didn't trust me enough to tell me that you wanted to help your neighbor Jimmy and go to prom with him." "You must be joking. I was a stupid schoolgirl, and I was afraid to hurt the feelings of my first serious boyfriend." "Were you stupid in college too?" I asked. When she gave me a questioning look, I continued, "Labor Day weekend before you went to college, we made love on a raft on Lake Simpson, and then we promised that we would be faithful to each other and get married after college. Your promise lasted 10 days. Sarah asked angrily, "Are you saying that you were absolutely faithful in your first year of college?" I shook my head and ignored her pointless question. "I mean, whether you agree or not, I doubt you've ever trusted me. Obviously, there is no trust between us,